Good evening. My name is Pat Marcarelli. I am president of the Westbrook Council of Beaches. Thank you for attending tonight's forum. Before turning the program over to our moderator, I'd like to thank the staff here at the Town Hall for providing and assisting with the setup for tonight's venue. Thanks to our friends at Valley Shore Cable TV. Guys, as usual, do an outstanding job for your hard work and everything. Nice job again. To our council members for their help with organizing tonight's event, thank you. Our candidates, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the council as well for showing your interest in getting involved with this forum and your dedicated service to our wonderful town. And thank you to everybody that brought food tonight to help us with the Shoreline Pantry. We certainly appreciate it at St. Mark's Church. It goes a long way. Also, just a quick note in conjunction with the Westbrook outlets and the Westbrook Police Department, the council is going to be holding a Stuffer Cruiser. This is part of the Alleviating Hunger program that we work on. It's going to be a Stuffer Cruiser with new clothes to benefit the Alice population in the area. This is going to be at the outlets on December 7th. And it's a Saturday, and it's from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So please try to help us out if you can. Check our website. It's westbrookcouncilofbeaches.org, and you can have everything up to date, all the news and so forth with that. Just a few words about the Council of Beaches. I hope everybody can hear me. I feel like I'm fading in and out here. We consist of representatives from all 17 neighborhood associations in Westbrook. We have representatives on virtually every town board, commission, and committee. We strive to serve the best interest of every member of the Westbrook community. We work with businesses and government agencies, both on the local and state level. We have supported our education system and our town's young people, as well as those residents with extra needs. Here's where I'm going to move on into our introduction to tonight's moderator. And this is kind of a segue. This past summer, our Alleviating Hunger Committee helped with the Board of Education's summer lunch programs and also conducted several programs. This would not have been possible without the help of Phil Cocciola from Oxford Academy in raising the funds for these lunch programs. Thank you, and now I'm going to turn the microphone and the evening's event over to our moderator this evening. Philip Cocciola is the headmaster of Oxford Academy. Thank you very much. Phil.
Good evening. On behalf of the Westbrook Council of Beaches, welcome to this candidates forum. I'm Phil Cocciola, and I've been asked to serve as your moderator for the evening. I am headmaster at Oxford Academy, all-around good guy, and I'm going to apologize in advance for the plethora of mistakes I will no doubt make this evening. We are delighted to have with us this evening all the candidates for the offices for first and second selectmen. I'd like to introduce you to Hiram Fuchs, Noel Bishop, George Pitlick Jr., and John Hall. These positions were determined in a drawing before this meeting and will be the order in which the candidates will give opening and closing remarks. The rules for tonight's forum, together with 2 to 3 questions of particular interest to the Westbrook Council of Beaches, were submitted to all the candidates 1 week prior to tonight's forum at the same time. The timekeeper for this evening will be Tony Fastea. Hi, Tony. Before starting with opening statements, I would like to urge you to all follow one basic protocol. Please do not applaud during the forum, as it will simply take time and prevent the audience from asking more questions and hearing more from the candidates. There will be 2 exceptions to this rule, and one is right now as we give a round of applause for all our candidates. Each candidate may make an opening statement of 1 minute, and the first opening statement will be by Hiram.
Good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight. Oh, wait, sorry. This is literally the first time I've ever held a microphone, so is it on?
Nope.
This one's on.
Or?
Hiram, this one's on.
Here. You try this one, Hiram. Got it? Yeah.
Good evening and thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Hiram Fuchs. I'm running for Westbrook First Selectman. I've lived in Westbrook for the last 12 years. I am a Connecticut State Marshal in Middlesex County, and I'm also the former owner-operator of Fox Driving School in Clinton. I have a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in teaching, and I speak Spanish. My wife Leslie is a 7th grade science teacher, and we have 2 wonderful children. Our daughter is 5, our son is 2.5. She's home right now trying to put her to bed. I think she needs more luck than I do. I became involved in town politics last year when my then 18-month-old son tripped and fell in the playground behind the firehouse. When he fell, he hurt his hands. I then wrote 2 letters to the town asking why they put crushed stone in the playground, and I didn't like the answers that I got. Since then, I've learned that there are a lot of issues in town. Bad decisions made behind closed doors, and there's no accountability, and I'd like to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Noah Bishop. We're supposed to talk about who we are and how we got here. My life began on a farm in South Dakota. I went to a one-room country schoolhouse and was fortunate to come and get a graduate degree from Yale. But during that period of time, I met my wife, Kit Bishop, who's done so much for me and my family. And so, Kit, thank you for that. Kit was also the principal of Daisy Ingraham School for 27 years. That's how I became first orientated to this town, all the possibilities of this town. I've had 3 different jobs, not careers. My first full-time job for 16 years was a dean at Quinnipiac University. My second job was executive director of the Connecticut State Dental Association. In that job, managing volunteers, lobbying at the state capitol, seeing how government worked, was my first introduction to really how government is and working with volunteers. And excuse me, and for the last 12 years, I've been the first selectman of Westbrook. All 3 of those jobs have one thing in common, and that's to be really orientated to never accepting the status quo, but looking for results, building consensus, working with diverse groups, and so on. So I'm very happy to be again running for this position. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is George Pillick Jr., and I'm running for the Board of Selectmen. I'm a lifelong resident of Westbrook, and I come from a family with a long history of public service. As an example, my father has served as a selectman, emergency management director, and also currently sits on the Board of Finance. I graduated from Worcester Polytech with a bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering. I am the owner of Jet Laundrette, the local laundromat down the road, as well as its general contractor during its rebuild. I first got involved as a charter member of the town's IT committee, and this is when I first personally experienced the lack of oversight and vision for the town. My next thing that I got involved in is the zoning commission. My experience with my rebuild gave me a firsthand perspective on the struggles that the individuals and businesses face when they're trying to develop their property in town. And I joined to try and bring this experience as well as trying to have an eye towards smart long-term development to its time. Guess that's it.
Thank you. John?
Hello, for those of you who don't know me, I am John Hall. I am also a lifelong Westbrook resident, attended the schools, and I have at least 2 former teachers in the room. I'm a 10-year incumbent on the Westbrook Board of Selectmen. Previous to that, I spent 27 years on Westbrook ZBA, 25 as chair. I've been deeply involved in the town. Personally, I'm the president of Artec Water Systems. I've been for 27 years. It's a small business that we own, employs several people. Also, my wife Bonnie and I own and operate Maple Breeze Farm. Maple Breeze Farm is a 200-acre operation in Westbrook. We farm 400 acres, and Maple Breeze was established by my family here in Westbrook in 1635. So my family goes back. My family has a long history of involvement with Westbrook public service as well as anything else you can think of. On the Board of Selectmen, I spend a lot of time scrutinizing the budget. My passion is budget, so also weekly monitoring the checks and expenses that go out of this building to make sure they're consistent with the budget and consistent with our goals for what we're trying to do in town. I'm proud of our 10-year record of maintaining minimal budget increases while we maintain all the services and in several cases established expansion of staffing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now follow the protocol as established by the council and agreed to with the random drawing prior to tonight's meeting. The Council of Beaches previously submitted to the candidates several questions that are of particular concern to the beach communities, but that may not otherwise have been brought to the candidates' attention. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer these questions, following which each may have 1 minute for rebuttal. Rebuttal is not required, and the candidates are urged to not rebut when there is no reason to do so, as refraining from unnecessary rebuttals will free up more time for questions from the audience. The order of responding to these questions was determined in a drawing before this meeting. Everyone got that? Okay. The council may also pose a question of general interest and then open the floor to the questions from the audience. The first question for tonight's debate, we will start with John. The question: the town has built up and maintained its reserves. The unassigned fund balance of over $5 million provides its flexibility and was cited by the rating agency Moody's when it confirmed the high A2 rating for the town's recent bond refunding. This saved Westbrook $361,000 in interest costs. Should the town continue to keep some 17% of its annual budget invested in reserves, spend some to reduce the mill rate, or put it to other uses? John?
Absolutely. I believe that we should have a fair amount of reserve. Currently, our reserve is 12.3%. Our actuaries and advisors recommend that we have a 12 to 15% reserve. We're right at the target. That is exactly why we've lowered our bonding rate and have an AA2 rating, is because of our reserves and sound fiscal management. Yes, we should keep that. We have to react to certain things. Over the years, we've had tropical storms hit town, Irene and Sandy. We've had to do repairs, and we've had to pay for those repairs right away and then wait for FEMA reimbursement. We need to have money in our savings account to react to these situations and react right away. We can't, let the damage sit there and try to figure out where we're getting the money from. I like to think that we've managed the town much as I manage my businesses and my personal affairs. Everybody likes to have a little savings account, a little rainy day fund. Everybody knows why that's necessary.
Hiram?
Hi. As I mentioned in my intro, I have a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in teaching. I'm also a former small business owner. I've had to make these types of decisions myself in my personal life. I'm not a huge fan of borrowing, but I know it's often useful in a municipal setting. We do need to keep a certain amount of money on hand in the town in order to keep that bond rating for Moody's. I know that's important. And I also think we need to have an emergency fund. My wife and I have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. That being said, if there's any money left over in the budget, I think the money's best spent on a grant writing team. I think there's a lot of federal money that's out there for people, municipalities, to get stuff done. I don't think we have enough people in the town hall that are writing grants. So if we're looking for any place to spend money, I think it would be to build a robust grant writing team.
Thank you. Noel?
I agree with the comments that have been made. Just to comment about how the reserves are established. When we build the budget process, meaning we, starting with the department heads, going to the Board of Selectmen and to the Board of Finance, after we look at all of our expenses and income, and as John said it right, 12% is the bottom, 15% is the ceiling. So those reserves are arrived at in relationship to all of our income and expenses. So much for the reserves. A comment about grant writing. This past year, we've received slightly over $1 million in grants that have been written by at least 6 different department heads. That's roughly 10% of our $10 million operating budget. I am not in favor of hiring a grant writer. My experience both in the university and the Dental Association is these individuals come in, but they often say to somebody else, you do the grant, you do the work. And it's not just the grant writer. The work really comes in following up the grants. An example of that is if you go down to the town center, you'll see a big sign up there that says this project was started 3 or 4 years ago from a small business grant. People ask me, why is that sign not being taken down? I have to tell them the truth. The truth is, until the Planning Commission, which is doing a good job, can close out that grant, and that takes a lot of time, you can't take that sign down. So I'm not in favor of hiring a grant writer. I think we have people on staff that can do it. Thank you.
George?
I do agree with the policy of keeping 17% in reserves. This is the average for towns in Connecticut that have the same credit rating as ours, AA2, sorry. If we allow our credit rating to decay, it will increase the cost of our future bonds. I strongly believe in budgeting for upcoming expenses, but also recognize that there are costs that are rising faster every year than inflation or our bond rate. After 6 years of inaction, the projected cost of the radio tower project has grown from about $750,000 to $1.2 million. This is an increase of $75,000 per year, or approximately 7%. This is well above inflation and our bond rates. This is an example of a project that needs to be bonded before its expenses keep rising.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you now have an opportunity for rebuttal if you desire.
I would like to do a rebuttal, please. Just a couple things I want to say. The grant writing team doesn't necessarily have to be new people brought into town. I was at the hazard mitigation meeting where the zoning enforcement officer, when he was asked about if he's writing grants, said, I have neither the time nor the expertise to write grants. That concerns me. And I've learned that the former town planner, over the course of her being here, was like 8 or 10 years, cost the town $800,000 while she brought in close to $3 million in grants. If you can hire somebody that can bring in many times more their salary, I think that's a smart business decision. That's the kind of decision I would make in my business all day long.
Thank you. No?
The world has changed in the last 5 or 6 years. The money that used to be available from the state for grants is in many ways dried up. The money, for example, down in the town center, those funds are very limited or do not exist. There's a man named Larry Wagner in Waterbury whose firm has worked with all of our municipalities, or most of them, and his firm basically has reduced staff and gone out of business because they know the amount of those grants are no longer available. Let's talk about the radio project, and it's an important project. We need to move forward with that project. But 2 things about that. Projects don't have legs under them until you actually get it in front of a budget committee and you assign numbers to them. And that was not assigned until about 1.5 years ago. We, despite multiple requests for 5 months, we did not have all the material we needed to have to hire a consultant. That consultant is in the process of finishing his work. I don't think that is going to cost $1 million. I do not know that. But once again, projects like this, the radio project, are very important. Thank you.
Just like to continue a little more with the fire department project. We've been accused of stalling it. I think that's totally off the mark. This project was first proposed by the fire department a number of years ago, that's true, and then they withdrew it for a couple of years. And then it was back on the table, like Noel said, 1.5 years ago. We've been working on it. We've got an ad hoc committee working on it. I don't think it's fair to run out and spend $1 million of our money without having a consultant give us some advice, a third-party person who doesn't have a vested interest in this. So I think it's only prudent that we do spend this money on a consultant. He's now under contract and he's getting ready to complete his report. I think we need to make an informed decision before we spend that money right away.
I absolutely agree. We definitely need to wait for the result of the consultant. However, this is not the first time that we've tried to go out and hire a consultant for this purpose.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any other time we've tried to go out and hire a consultant. I insisted when this came forth in the budget committee process that we had the ad hoc committee. The Board of Selectmen agreed. That's the first time that I'm aware that we, through that process, hired a consultant for this project.
One thing I'd like to clarify, I wasn't specifically talking about state grants. There are billions of dollars of federal grants, especially for hazard mitigation like rising sea level, that we need to go after. So while the state grants may have dried up, no pun intended, there are federal grants out there that we need to be pursuing.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that's a good segue to question number 2. Okay. Westbrook has recently had meetings on hazard mitigation, which included potential hardening to mitigate impacts of flooding. The town raised the roads in the Coral Sands neighborhood in the 1980s due to regular flooding, but the continuing rise in sea level, both natural and man-made, has again impacted this low-lying neighborhood and other neighborhoods which are affected by tidal rise as well as storm surge and heavy rains. Such flooding affects property values and the tax base. This also raises health concerns. The Connecticut Mirror series on Connecticut's vanishing shoreline last December included data from NOAA that indicated Westbrook has 127 homes worth $48.5 million that are at risk of chronic inundation as soon as 11 years from now. Action items in a 2014 hazard mitigation plan included identifying and applying for grants to fund infrastructure improvements, as well as setting aside town funds for such in the capital improvement program. As a selectman, what is being done and should be done in addressing these issues? Hiram, you get to go first.
So first thing I'd like to say is the question sort of sums up the situation. And I think when they talk about 11 years, I think the water's already here. I've been on Seaside Avenue and Old Mail Trail and have seen 2-3 feet of water on those roads at periods. We have king tides that a few years ago were 2 or 3 months, every 2 or 3 months. Now they're happening once a week. This is obviously a massive problem. We're going to need a dedicated team of town employees and outside consultants to work on this, to come up with both short and long-term solutions. One example I like to put out where the town, I think, is dropping the ball is the jetties. The jetties that we have, there's 8 of them that were built in the 1960s. The jetties are failing. You can see through many of them. And they've had sort of a patch and pray approach to it where they've done small repairs to the jetties over time. But one good storm and those jetties can wash away. And I remember hearing the public works director at a meeting saying, well, I think they'll hold if a hurricane comes. They'll probably hold if a hurricane comes. But I'm aware that if those jetties are washed away in a storm, that not only will it cost $100,000 to replace, but now you have to get the state and federal government involved. This has to be the Army Corps of Engineers that comes in. That's going to put this price tag much higher. I know the town has budgeted $100,000 for one of these jetties, but these jetties should have been replaced a long time ago. Thank you.
Noel?
2 things about the hazard mitigation. I'm on the executive committee of the Council of Governments at 17 towns. All 17 towns have hired consultants to develop a hazard mitigation plan. Why do they do that? Because you need the outside professional help to evaluate. Do you raise the roads? Where does the water go? It's as much about resiliency as it is hazard mitigation. So number 1, and also number 2, I understand that in November, from what I heard a month ago downstairs in room A, we'll have our report from the consultant doing this work, and among other things, we'll identify funding. For the first time today, I received information from DEMAS that grants could be available, and the deadline for that is either November 12th or November 19th. A word about the jetties. There's no doubt that our jetties they're in great need of repair. Through a very rigorous, again, thorough budget process last year, we decided, we, meaning the town, in the budget process, and it was voted in a town meeting, that we could not spend up to $1 million at one time. So what we agreed to do, we hired a person whose name is Bob Doan. He's been working with the state. We understand by the end of October, we'll have that certificate of permission from the state. If we get that certificate of permission to build, it will also apply to all the other jetties. So the question is, like so many things in the budget, it's a question of wants and needs. There's so many things we want, but there's only so many things we can afford a given year. So we've started down that road. Mr. Fuchs is right. We have set aside $100,000, and in the out years, if you look in the capital plan, we've placed $100,000 for each of the following years. So we have a plan. We've not been kicking this down the road. It's important to our seashore.
George?
If you look at the capital plan for the fiscal year 2019 to 2020, you will see that they have set aside exactly $0 for resiliency planning of our town and its infrastructure. Additionally, in 2015, there was $30,000 allocated for the jetties. That cost has now ballooned to $100,000.
A note on the jetties you just mentioned, the $30,000 was for maintenance. We've done maintenance each year on them, and now it's time to replace. So that 30 was maintenance. As far as the roads, this is a major challenge. As you said in the question here, we raised the roads in Coral Sands area in the 80s, and now it's a problem again. So rather than do this every 30 years, I think we need to step back. We've had involvement with the Army Corps. I've walked the roads with Noel and the Army Corps down at Old Mail Trail and at Coral Sands. This needs a long-term solution, not a 20-year Band-Aid. If you've been around town as long as I have, you know that's always a problem. It's getting worse, I acknowledge that. But we really need to come up with a long-term plan, not another Band-Aid like we did back in the 80s.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And that takes time.
If you have a rebuttal?
So two things I'd like to say. I believe I heard the first selectman say that grants are available. A moment ago, he said that they have dried up. The second thing, he said jetties are a want. I think a pickleball court is a want. I think jetties are a need.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, thank you. Next question. Various players at the state level from time to time have proposed regionalization as a means to reduce local government costs, as was done in the past in Regional School District Number 4 for Chester, Deep River, and Essex. Westbrook is one of 17 local governments in the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, which coordinates land use and transportation planning. What are your views on the pros and cons of regionalization of services, and are there any functions where you believe this may be practical? No.
Last year, the governor proposed regionalization of schools. As a result of many comments and testimonies at the Capitol, he withdrew that. And so that's what happened with regionalization. But let's talk about Westbrook for a minute. I'm aware from our superintendent of schools, whenever there are attempts, I shouldn't say attempts, when there's opportunities to work with neighboring towns, for example, Old Saybrook, she has talked to them. There's a sharing of supplies and monies for food services. At times, there's a sharing of bus services. 3 years ago, Old Saybrook's football field was not finished in the fall, and we stepped in to help out. So I'm aware that our superintendent of school, who's also on the member of the Kerma board, there's constant discussions, not about the regionalization of schools, but regionalizations of services. That's what we have to talk about. And whether that's going to save money or not, I think we're in good hands with that. Just a word about the town. Again, I go back constantly to the Council of Governments, 17 towns. If you were to ask, and we've had many discussions, and we've talked to our legislators about this, we are opposed to the idea of the state imposing regionalization on our municipality. Why? Because we don't want the state telling us what to do. There's often costs that are involved with this. We want to regionalize on a voluntary basis. Two examples of that: the animal control shelter in Clinton, we've been regionalized with that, and Madison for the past 4 or 5 years. The 9-town transit, which I happen to also be on the board, we volunteered as towns, and we gladly contribute every year now. Those are examples when you regionalize services, we think we can get it done better. So bottom line is, we're very cautious when you have the state force us to regionalize.
George?
I am firmly against forced regionalization by the state. There are some cases where regionalization by choice makes sense, but before we make these decisions, there are a lot of things to consider. Primarily, one of them is the financial impact on both a short and a long-term basis. Another thing to consider is the amount of say that Westbrook would have in this scenario. If we were to join a region where we are either supplying a small amount of funds or using the service in a minimal amount, then we might lose a lot of say. Hold on, my bad. We need to make choices that are in Westbrook's best interests, not for anyone else.
I also disagree with forced regionalization. I don't think it's practical. Noel mentioned a couple of instances where we are regionalized successfully. I think it takes good study. Recently, our animal control officer is retired. Noel looked to regionalize that with another town, 2.5 times the cost that we pay. So we're continuing to do that in-house. One thing that particularly irks me, we were forced into regionalization of our probate districts by the state a number of years ago. Our costs tripled the first year, and they've gone up since then. We can't do that in town for 1/3 of the cost. I mean, really, regionalization is something that really needs to be studied. When it does work, make the decision and do it. But all in all, just to regionalize for the sake of regionalization, to me, it doesn't make any financial sense.
Thank you. Hiram?
Okay, I'd like to say regionalization as a concept is neither good nor bad. It's basically how it's done. An example of a regionalized service that we take advantage of now is the resident trooper model. Westbrook, as well as East Haddam, which will be my comparison, we contract with the state to provide police services. They provide a number of troopers, and the towns provide police officers and equipment, and we have access to state police resources. East Haddam has an excellent model. They spent last year $599,000 on salaries. They have 1 resident trooper, 4 full-time officers, and 3 part-time officers. They have consistent police coverage. Westbrook, on the other hand, last year spent $720,000 on troopers and police officer salaries. We have 2 resident troopers and 8 part-time officers. The problem with this model for Westbrook is the Westbrook police officers determine when they work. They pick their own shifts. So what ends up happening is we have what happened on the 4th of July, where we had not a single constable scheduled to work the evening of the 4th, okay? So we're spending more for our police and we're getting less.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you have an opportunity for rebuttal.
In the budget process a year ago, the then Lieutenant Costa volunteered. We did not ask him. Came to the Board of Selectmen and suggested, I think you might consider how you staff police services in this town. And his suggestion was at that time that we might have only 1 trooper and hire 1 full-time constable in year 1 and maybe another full-time constable in year 2. That was very compelling to us. We went along with that. A full-time trooper costs, with all the benefits of everything, about $210,000. You can hire 1 constable with benefits probably for $90,000. So I'm not in favor of, for example, because we looked at the cost implications, and if you looked at the most recent issue of the Westbrook events, you will see on page 7 a statement from Trooper Buck. It was a whole article on policing. What Trooper Buck is basically saying, the way we are policing in Westbrook now, he's very comfortable with that. Do we need to have more constables? Yes. But if we were to go to 3 or 4 constables, I think as being suggested here, we're right back to where we started before. That is too much money. Hiring 4 full-time constables would raise our mill rate by half a mil.
As far as the policing, I do agree with what the lieutenant from the troop advised us. Cut back to the 1 resident, which we are doing in the process of. We're actually posted the job now for the first full-time constable. I'm in favor of adding another one in the next budget year. We're up to 8 part-timers. I think we're going to get more shifts covered with the same or less money.
Any rebuttals? Hiram?
So the first selectman said that adding more full-time constables is going to raise the mill rate. I disagree. If you look at the 2018 actual spending of East Haddam on their troopers and their constables, it's $599,000. That's the actual number from there. You can actually find it on their website, unlike Westbrook. Westbrook spent, I think it was $719 or $720 for the same exact services. So we spent more money than East Haddam. He mentioned Trooper Buck. When I spoke with Trooper Buck, he said the limiting factor for Westbrook is the police contract that allows the constables to pick their own shifts. They had such a problem in the past with constables not wanting to work Friday and Saturday nights that they actually had to remove Monday and Tuesday as viable options to force them into working the weekends. That's a major problem, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Okay, we'll go on to our next question. The town's outstanding debt has been declining over the past several years and is at a reasonable level. The employee retirement plan is commendably fully funded, and the town has made all of the required contributions during that period. The volunteer firefighters pension fund is 76% funded, and the constable's pension fund is 52% funded, with required payments made. The combined unfunded liability of these 2 plans was last reported at $633,000. The town and Board of Ed also provide retirement medical benefits. While retired employees pay the premiums, the town reimburses retired town employees $2,400 a year after age 65, and the Board of Ed $1,200 a year. There is no trust fund. The town and Board of Ed pay annual benefits but make no payments toward unfunded liabilities. 2 years ago, the 2 combined accrued unfunded actuarial liabilities had grown to $2.8 million, with the town's proportion 17% of that and the Board of Ed the rest. Should the town and Board of Ed make changes in their next contracts to these plans? George, you get to go first.
The town and Board of Education should set up trusts and begin paying these unfunded liabilities. It is easy to fall into the trap of cutting future liabilities to balance the budget. This does more damage in the long term. If Westbrook wants to decrease its future liability, this should be addressed in the next round of contract negotiations. These decreases in benefits, however, should only affect future employees, not current ones. When the town hires new people, whether they are volunteer firemen or constables, they are told the benefits of this employment or volunteerism. They make financial decisions for their future based on these stated benefits. It is not morally or ethically right to make drastic changes to these benefits after they are employed.
John?
I'm not so sure these numbers are accurate. As far as I know from our actuaries, we fund our pensions to the amount that they suggest every year in the budget. As far as the Board of Ed, I'm not involved in the Board of Ed budget, so I don't want to comment on that. But as far as I know, the town funds our pension funds fully to what the actuaries advises.
Hiram?
I believe in honoring our obligations. I'm a man of my word, and I think if we've made promises to our town employees, we need to live up to them. That being said, if we're going to make changes to the plan, it should be to the new hires that come in. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is when you start cutting packages for people when they're looking to work in the town, we're also competing with other towns and other municipalities to attract the best people. If we're not able to attract the best people because we're not providing the benefits that other towns are providing, then we're going to have to look at that as well.
No?
This is an actuarial balance that's given to us by Siegel, who's our actuary, and they've been doing this for years. So what you see here is a reflection of what they have agreed to. I do agree that, secondly, that when we negotiate contracts, whether it's school or town, this should be taken under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, if you have a rebuttal? No? Thank you. Next question. Lack of preventative maintenance can lead to higher costs over time to repair buildings and repair or replace building systems and structures that deteriorate. How do you or would you have the town provide proper maintenance of town buildings? Who should have overall responsibility for prioritizing preventive maintenance and capital projects? And what are the roles and should be the roles of various entities in town providing the inputs and deciding the outcome? John, you get to go first.
So a few years ago, we had a consultant come in, and again, we need someone, I think, with a third opinion to come in, and they looked at all of our buildings and gave us a list of priorities, which we've addressed almost all down the line. We have an ad hoc committee that does keep track of our buildings and the necessary repairs, make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and we follow through. Recently, replacing the handicap ramp on the firehouse, one example. I think our buildings are in pretty good shape, and I think we do have an eye towards maintaining them. Some of our buildings don't need much. A few are probably going to need some things in the future. I rely on the people who manage these buildings. If it's the town hall, I rely on the people who work here every day and do the outside work to let us know what's coming up, what needs to be done. I'm not going to go around and check on the buildings. We have the ad hoc committee for that. We do have those people that give us advice, and we do follow through on maintenance. I don't think we've deferred anything that I can think of.
Hiram?
So I can say I look around town and I can see a lack of proper maintenance. I remember not too long ago where the gutters in this very building were so clogged up that there were plants that were 2 feet tall growing out of them. And apparently what happened was when we got a lot of rain, the rain actually washed into the building and damaged some of the ceiling tiles. I think there needs to be a facilities manager in town, somebody who can coordinate the maintenance between the school district and the town, and take an inventory of our buildings. I believe the town has not done an inventory in its buildings since 2011. I don't think we necessarily need to hire somebody new. I've heard that there is a mechanic at the town garage who's really knowledgeable about buildings, and that he comes over and actually assists the town with various problems. I think it's possible maybe to move somebody like that into a facilities manager position, and maybe we find somebody else to fix the trucks. My big thing is I think there are a lot of people in town hall and the town itself that may not be in the perfect position for them. We have to make sure we have the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats. That being said, if there is maintenance to be had in town, I think Public Works should handle basic maintenance, and I think anything more complicated like rebuilding jetties needs to be put out to bid.
Thank you. Noel?
The gentleman that we're referring to at the Public Works, his name is John Kane. In the contract that was given to him, he is working a minimum of 5 hours a week to come and help our facilities people in the town hall. So he has been given that time. If you think about where we are with our town buildings, the fire department, as John's mentioned, the ramp has been replaced. There's some replacement of the doors. The original building, which considerable money was spent on, is basically in shape. The library and the Public Works facilities are really brand new. So let's think about this building. There's the Academy building, small building, but we have two budgets. We have an annual maintenance budget that covers $1,500 here, $2,000 there. But in our capital budget, the major facility issue we have right now is the roof of this building. There's over $100,000 been put aside, I think, the next 3 or 4 years for the replacement of this roof. And I think, except for this building, and the roof is important, but we've done some repairs in this building. We've put in new carpeting. We've recently, if you've drawn around, we refurbished the outside. So I think we have the people in place who can take care of this. I don't think we need to hire additional staff to do it.
Thank you. George?
My experience on the Zoning Commission has shown me that approval is usually contingent on a maintenance plan. Westbrook holds its property owners to a higher standard than itself. Currently, town maintenance is done on a need basis according to the individual departments. There is very little oversight on a town level. The town needs to appoint an existing employee who knows what a reasonable cost is for projects and knows how to turn a screwdriver. This employee needs to approach every department head and gather their input before making recommendations to the Board of Selectmen.
Any rebuttals? Thank you. We are ahead of schedule. So we will now move to questions from the audience with the following rules. When you are recognized, please give your name before beginning to speak, and the microphone is in the center of the room. Questioners will have 30 seconds to pose a question to any candidate, but make no statements. Questions only. All candidates will have 1 minute for response to each question. At approximately 8:50, we will stop the questions, and each candidate will be given 1 minute for a closing statement. The floor is now open for any questions. So walk up to the microphone, please. Announce your name.
Hi, my name is Vince Gentili. I live here in town, and I am a member of the Westbrook Fire Department for almost 15 years now. So my question pertains to the radio project. I know some of the details of the radio project and some of the technical details. We had a solid plan. We had surveys done to determine the position of new towers, et cetera, et cetera. We did defer it. We got new apparatus. We got several pieces of new apparatus, and we deferred this plan to not burden the town with so much more money. But at this point, my question goes to Noel. Why are we now going back to the drawing board and redesigning an entire radio system?
I don't think our consultant is going back to the drawing boards. What he was charged to do is to have one-on-one discussions with all members of the ad hoc committee. He also sent around a needs assessment, and I think that, I haven't seen the results of that. When it does, it'll come in front of the ad hoc committee. So I don't think he's going back and redesigning it. He's trying to get our discussion focused. Is this really what we need? He will also be talking to people at the state. His job is to be as objective and as professional as he can. We chose him because of experience with other municipalities. I do not think we're going back to the drawing boards.
Any other candidates wish to answer the question? Thank you. Are there any other questions? Please walk up to the mic, introduce yourself.
May I comment further on that question? Too late. Can I?
Hi, Tony Koza, 22 Lilac Street, and a member of the Council of Beaches. A question for each of the candidates. What have you done to reach across the aisle to the opposite party at both the local, state, and federal level? Thank you.
I've mentioned on several occasions, the council and governments represent 17 towns. There are 2 town managers on that council, probably then the rest are split between Democrats and Republicans. We put party issues aside. When we debate issues with the council of governments, we tried to look at our respective areas with some unanimity. A good example of this is the Planning Commission, with the help of Mr. Knapp, submitted a grant. I asked as a member of the executive committee for a special meeting because I knew there was a timeline, and I'm very pleased to say that we got a #1 consideration out of that. I was just informed late last week that then had to go to the New Haven Council of Governments, and out of 12 projects, we were #3. And now it's a question of if the federal government releases the funds, we will get approximately $900,000 if the federal government releases the funds. So that's the example of working across party lines. The second thing I would say is, if anybody follows the Board of Selectmen in minutes, the boards and commissions and so on, you will see that we have a diversity of opinions, often from different political points of view. But when John and I have gone to the Board of Selectmen, we've made sure that we've taken every issue there, regards to the political consequences.
Thank you. George, do you want to answer that? I'll go down the line.
On my time on the zoning commission, party has never come up. It is only within the past month and a half that I've actually figured out what the party affiliation is of every single member. And if you're talking about crossing party lines, at the muster, what did I do? I crossed the street and shook hands with all of these fine Republicans.
So working together. I mean, Westbrook's a small town. We're too small for a political divide like the federal government is into. This is a small town. We've all got to do the best we can. For 25 years as the chair of the ZBA, I told every member, leave that hat at the door. We're not Democrats and Republicans in here. You're making decisions for the best interest of this town. On the state level, I was recently in Mr. Governor Lamont's office for a bill signing. I've known him. I met him a few times. I knew Governor Malloy fairly well. Joe Courtney has spent several hours at our farm on one-on-one basis, and I've taken Joe out to other farms. I'm very involved in agriculture in the state. Know Joe quite well, and Joe's been to some of our veterans programs here in town. He's also assisted us with dredging in this town, getting us thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars for dredging, which is important to this town, for the lifeblood of the marinas and the marine business, which is somewhere between 18 and 20% of our town's economy. So I think I reach across the aisle fairly well, work with anybody who's sitting in any seat that's available.
I'd just like to say that I'm on the Town Center Revitalization Committee, and like George, I don't know the political affiliations of a lot of the people on the committee. I think the issues facing Westbrook are not partisan issues. They're issues that affect us all. I have no problem working with people. As a state marshal, I work with people from many diverse backgrounds. As a former driving instructor, I worked for 10 years. I taught driver's ed in Spanish entirely. I've worked with people from many different backgrounds, and I look forward to working with them in the future.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Please step up to the microphone, announce your name.
Yeah, hi, Andy Schatz, Chapman Avenue. This year's budget has a significant amount of money included in it for a study of the wastewater situation in Westbrook Center. Assuming that that study shows that the wastewater situation can be dealt with, what vision, if any, do you have for change in Westbrook Center? And what process would you use to ensure that your vision and the vision of any other residents is fully and fairly considered?
Hiram, I'll start with you, please.
It's a good question. If you look at our town center, you can see that half of the businesses are empty, and this has been like this for a long, long time. The limiting factor is obviously the septic. I think the town's been too slow to act on this. I think there needs to be a meeting of the minds. I think we need to have the owners of the properties in the town green. We need to have town officials get together, and also members of the community, to shape what Westbrook's town center is going to look like. A few years ago, UConn did a study where they did like a 100-page study on how to redo the town green, so there are solid plans in place for how to proceed with that. I think the town has been dragging its feet. I think our town green is one of the poorer ones in this area, and that would be a priority if I'm elected first selectman.
3 weeks ago in this room, I convened a meeting. There were over 75 businesses here, and this question came up. In fact, I forced the question. I said, where do we stand in this community regarding the town center? Yes, the issues of sewers is one of the issues, but let me mention something else. We don't have to pick up a newspaper. In fact, the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, put these numbers out last week. Across the country, malls are closing down. The problem is the retail industry. The retail is very difficult. All you have to do is think about Amazon. So yes, to have towns downtown, to have centers downtown like us that don't have retail business, that's a difficult situation. But I know in front of the zoning commission, Mr. Clark, who owns 2 or 3 of those stores down there, has plans to put some non-retail stores in there. Go up to the Westbrook Mall. Let me make a comment about that. 3 years ago, that mall was brought out by a company from France, and it's being managed by a company called Levin in New Jersey. We've had at least 3 or 4 meetings with our staff and with our appropriate people here in our land use, and we've done everything we can to say, what can we do as a town to help that mall expand? But the question always comes back is the fact that retail stores are very difficult these days. So yes, I think our town center needs to be upgraded, whether we want to go through another referendum as we did over 15 years ago in this town to have sewers. It was resoundingly defeated. Doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it again. But there's enormous cost involved in putting sewers there. I'm not against it. I'm certainly for doing everything we can to promote more businesses in the town center.
As far as I'm aware, even if the town would like to put in a sewer system, we do not have a waterway that we are allowed to discharge this water into. So we are stuck with the original issue that we would need to do a septic system. As Sonia has said, the land theoretically is capable of the sewage that it is required for each individual property. However, we all know that the biggest roadblock is the cost. And that is something that we need to work with the property owners to try and make the town center just like any of our neighbors, like Saybrook or Essex or Chester or Deep River.
I think the question's been pretty well answered. There's 2 limiting factors. One is the land. Where do we put it? Do we have to use town land? Do we use town land? And do we take other land by eminent domain? What do we do? Where do we get rid of the gallonage? That's the problem 1. Problem 2 is who's going to pay for it. You know, it's a lot of money. And what I hear from people in town is keep our tax bills pretty stable. Well, if you're going to put a lot of money into a septic system or a sewer plant, that's not going to keep your tax bills stable. So the question I would have is who wants to pay for it first, and secondly, where do we do it? And I think that's been pretty well addressed.
Yes.
I would just like to talk about the outlet center that First Selectman brought up. The outlet center currently has 45% vacancy. Last year they paid close to $700,000 in property taxes. That's between the property itself and the fixtures inside the stores. I feel that the outlet center is on the verge of bankruptcy. If that were to happen, I heard the backup plan for the outlet center is to sell the property to Middlesex Hospital. If that happens, it would take that property completely off the tax rolls. That would be a terrible thing to happen. I also have had meetings with the management of the outlet center. The solution to the outlet center is not to keep it as retail, but the solution is to transfer it from a place where you buy things to a place where you do things. This is a national trend with outlet centers. There's studies that show that if you give people an opportunity to do things in an outlet, they can survive and thrive. I think that's going to be a top priority. I don't want to see that tax revenue lost.
Any other rebuttals? Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, walk up to the mic, announce your name, please.
Rick Newberg on Old Clinton Road. So do you support the taxes in this state, Mr. Fuchs? Support them? Yeah, you for what Governor Lamont has been doing around here, and you're talking about sewers and all these expenses here. I'm getting forced out of the state, and you want to raise taxes here? Are you going to raise taxes here if you get in, like Governor Lamont is doing?
I'm not planning to raise any taxes, and as far as taxes being raised, my mother lives in town. She's been here for 20 years. She's going to be 82 on Thursday. Since the first selectman has taken office, her property taxes have gone up by over 50%, and her property value has gone down. So I don't think this is necessarily a Democrat versus Republican issue. I'm looking to make the town work smarter and promote business. A good example of this is the Lee Company in Exit 64. They'd like to further develop their property. They can't do that because they don't have a traffic light. I think the town needs to take the lead on this issue and help them get that traffic light to expand their business. Those are the types of jobs that we want to retain in Westbrook, and this is the type of businesses that we want to have thrive here. We're not just competing with the state, we're competing with towns in this area. Lee Company has facilities in other areas. I think it's important for us to make them welcome in this place, in Westbrook. And if businesses thrive in town, then they pay a lot of taxes. They're happy to pay taxes if they're thriving. If they're not thriving, it's the taxpayers in the town that are going to pick up the burden.
People are leaving. People are leaving. Okay.
Comment about the Lee Company. approximately 2 months from now, a 100,000 square foot facility will come on our tax rolls. If they can have it, there'll probably be 120 jobs. Yes, the traffic signal has been an issue there for several years. It's gone to our traffic authority. They've been very supportive of this. I know Representative Carney here has worked with them, so they're not being neglected. That is a significant problem, but it's not a problem that I think at this point in time is going to discourage them. Regarding the level of taxes that have been raised, I think if you took a look at all the surrounding towns, our taxes have not gone up more than other towns. In fact, I think it can be argued in some cases they've maintained a good level of support. Have they gone up? People compare us to Old Saybrook all the time. But think about Old Saybrook for a minute. They have more businesses than we have, so they have a bigger business. We have 4 major businesses in the town that carry most of the business tax: the Lee Company, Water's Edge, the outlets, I know they're having some difficulty, and the marinas. Those 4 really are our major taxpayers. Of course, we have a lot of small businesses that are important to us, but regarding the Lee Company, I think they are on the right trajectory, and the town has been very supportive of all their initiatives.
Thank you. You want to answer the question? Any other questions this evening? Okay, thank you. We will now allow each candidate 1 minute for closing remarks. We will start with John.
So I'm going to make this very brief. I love Westbrook, and I've given a lifetime of mostly volunteer service to this town. I look forward to continuing to move Westbrook forward, maintaining a stable tax base. Thank you for your support.
George?
Thank you for coming out. I am proud to call Westbrook my hometown, and I want to make it an even better place to work and live. I will bring unique insight and fresh ideas and creative problem solving to tackle the disruptive challenges that we face. I will apply my knowledge running a small business to make informed, cost-effective decisions and provide the most benefit to all of Westbrook.
No?
Beginning in late July, almost every single weekend, I and members of our Republican team have been knocking on doors, hundreds of doors. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, and our objective is to say, what is on your mind? The number one issue is our taxes. Please watch our taxes. If you're going to add services, we want them scrutinized as much as they can. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. I'm asking for your support to run again, because I think the commitment that I've made, the energy I've put into this, my work schedule, my ability to be available 24/7 is an indication of how much this job means to me. We know that our financial house is in order. Think of the budget discussion and the approval of the minutes of the budget at last year's meeting in May. Only 8 people voted against our budget. I wish there were more people that show up, but for the past 10 years that Mr. Hall and I have been in this office, I've been in 2 years longer than him, every single referendum that we've had or meetings on the budget have passed without much objection. I think the reason for that, there's transparency. We start in December. It takes 5 months to develop budgets, whether they're capital or whatever. There's so much work that goes into this. That's that financial base that I think is important for our town to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Noel.
I would just like to say, Mr. Bishop in his initial intro said that he is going to not be the status quo moving forward. I think he is the status quo. He's been in office for 12 years. I think there's a pattern of bad decision-making in this town that just keeps repeating itself. We just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. I don't think this is going to work moving forward. You can see the types of challenges that Westbrook is facing, whether it's flooding from our oceans or problems coming down from Hartford. We need a first selectman who meets these challenges head on, and I think that's me. Ask yourself, do you want 2 more years of the status quo? You know, if you don't, vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to please join us in thanking the candidates this evening. A round of applause. In closing, I'd like to also thank the town of Westbrook for the use of this room, Valley Shore Community Television for televising this event. Most importantly, we want to thank you for your attendance, your interest, and your questions, and to once again remind you to vote on November 5th. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.